By Condon, a security advisor from eNCA Management Consultants. Carl, thank you so much for your time. Cable theft absolutely wrecks our infrastructure. The power goes out, obviously, but it has such a layered impact. Just explain how far-reaching it is when cables are stolen.
Well, and thank you to your viewers and for the opportunity. Yeah, unfortunately, this is nothing new. I wish it was. I wish we were talking about a crime that had just recently sprung up, in which case we'd be saying, what are we going to do about it? But I mean, this has been going on for years and years and years. And the reality of the situation is we seem to, as a country, and here I'm referring more to the authorities, we seem to be doing absolutely nothing about it. It's almost as if cable theft is part and parcel of the just like it is with Eskom's rolling blackouts. It's just something we always have to live with. Nothing is really being done. I don't see much from the police. In the private sector, the guys are doing what they can. But that's not enough. You know, you can't just drive around and protect cables all day. My biggest concern, and I think that of many of those in the field, is that we're not doing enough to target the people buying the cables. Catching the blokes pulling it out the ground is a small part of the problem. It's those that are actually trading in it, melting it down, and then reselling it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I mean, we know that they've set up within the police an infrastructure unit that's actually going to target cable thieves. We know that there was a bust in Soweto just recently. We also know there is a growing call to ban people who sell scrap metal. Do you think that's the way to go?
Well, I don't necessarily think, you know, I mean, we're a free trade, a free market country. I mean, banning people in trading in scrap metal, I think, is not necessarily the way to go, because, don't get me wrong, there's a need for scrap metal companies. Someone's got to melt down and deal with scrap. I mean, we have enough of it. So I don't think banning people who trade in scrap. What I do think, though, is much like pawn shops, and I mean pawn as in second-hand goods, there needs to be a more of a watchdog over these industries. Yeah. You never read about the police going in and doing random spot checks in cable companies. I do think they need to be policed proper, and policing, I'm talking about, there needs to be a governing body overseeing scrap metal dealers. If you're caught with anything, there shouldn't be a slap on the wrist and a fine. To me and to many, that is an offence that is now against the country, so to speak. It's an offence against the state, and therefore I think you should be treated as such.
It's interesting because I think in January Kenya decided to outlaw scrap metal sales, and they just basically banned the whole industry. And they very recently said we can't do that anymore. It's actually not working. So they've now decided to start with stronger regulation of the industry, which is very much what you are suggesting, and it does sound like a more workable solution. But if we look at Eskom specifically, and we have been showing pictures of what Eskom cited as clear signs of sabotage of their network. I mean, that is, as you say, I mean, that's almost treasonous, isn't it? Because that has such a massive impact on the economy, on our ability to do business, and it can lead to knock-on crimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we can hide away from the fact anymore that there is definitely an element. I mean, there's always going to be an element of crime, but there is certainly an element of, I would say, almost terrorism to a degree, to destabilize the country. That's how it's appearing. And stealing Eskom equipment is one thing, but sabotaging power stations and the sort of things that we heard from Mr. De Ruyter a couple of months back, there seems to be something else at play here. And to me, that is absolutely, you've just said it correctly, that's treasonous. That is treason to the highest degree. You are plotting against your country and its citizens. And I don't think enough has been done to really accept that at authority level. I'm talking here at ANC level. I honestly don't.
Yeah. Carl, you work in the security industry. You're an advisor. I would imagine that on every single day you deal with people who've been victims of crime, who are trying to keep themselves safer. Talk to me about some of the trends, some of the things that ordinary South Africans are now resorting to try and keep their homes and their loved ones safe.
Well, I mean, the things we all see is the things that are sort of happening the most, which is, and not everyone can afford home security. But the reality is people are starting to say, well, if I can't rely on the state to look after me, the next best thing is I need to rely on private enterprise, which means, your security companies, etc. But that also means higher walls, electric fencing, and hence there is an irony right there, electric fencing. Without electricity, it's a bit of a difficult thing to have. But, those who are fortunate enough to have generators and solar power are in a better position than probably the vast majority. But people are starting to take their personal and home security to another level because they feel let down. And one can't blame them, but there's always going to be a disparaging difference between what certain people in a middle class to upper class can afford versus everybody else. And sadly, that is just the reality that one has to accept is there. But that we are not in a country where we feel safe. We're not in a country where we feel that even when there is a serious incident, the police are going to respond on time. So security companies are booming off the back of this absolute epidemic of crime that exists. And without power, that means alarms don't work. That means CCTV cameras often don't work. If one looks at the crime stats, they escalate during blackouts. Rolling blackouts is an open invitation to rolling crime. And it makes perfect sense. I mean, if there's no electricity, then there's none of these electronic items that are working. And it's all part and parcel. So it's a snowball effect.
So when you're talking about private citizens trying to keep themselves safe, and you're absolutely right, for the vast majority of South Africans, they just don't have these options. Is it about having backups when your electricity goes out so that you're not vulnerable during a rolling blackout?
Yeah, it is. Starting with generators, off-the-grid type of backup power supplies, whether it's solar or whether it's, UPS and backup batteries. But these things don't come cheap. And that is, sadly, I wish we could all afford it. We'd all be in a better place. But these things do not come cheaply. And those who can afford it obviously are moving towards that way. And then there's the physical side of guarding, having security guards in your neighborhoods, your armed response companies. They're the next level, because if you can't afford home security, you've got to go with neighborhood security.
Thank you so much for chatting to us this afternoon. Kyle Condon, he's a security advisor from D&K Management Consultants, and telling us that quote has really struck me: rolling blackouts tends to lead to a rolling crime.